The day before the wedding photo shoot, Gary's ex-girlfriend Jane asked, "Wanna make a bet?" I agreed, and I lost. Turns out, someone who's favored can really be fearless. 5 years of love couldn't beat a single sentence from an ex. In that moment, I finally let go of my feelings for Gary. Gary said, "Once you decide, don't regret it." But in the end, he was the one who regretted. He begged me for another chance. But seriously. Trash is something you throw out once and that's enough. Today was supposed to be the day Gary and I took our wedding photos. I've dreamed of being Gary's bride for almost 10 years. Finally, the day arrived. He came to pick me up early. We had breakfast together, everything seemed perfect. But just as we were about to head to the bridal shop, Gary got a call. As he picked up the phone, I noticed him stealing a glance at me. After the call ended, Gary looked troubled. "There's a problem with a batch of products at the factory. I need to check it out. Emma, you go to the store and get your dress fitted. I'll join you after I sort this out." Hearing this, I gripped the car door, my fingers tightly clenching the handle. I shot him a sharp look and asked, "Gary, tell me, how do you take wedding photos without the groom?" Seeing Gary frown, I pressed on, "Do you understand what these photos mean to us?" Maybe he wasn't used to hearing me speak so seriously. He got a little annoyed. "Emma, don't overreact. This is work. What can I do if there's a problem with the products?" Or... He suddenly leaned in closer and teased, "Emma, can't you be without me for even a second? Come on, get your makeup done. I'll be there as soon as I can to see my beautiful wife, okay?" He waited a moment, but I stayed silent. Gary, feeling a bit awkward, rubbed his nose and got into another Bentley, leaving me standing there in a daze. Just yesterday, Gary's ex, Jane, came to me and said, "Emma, why don't we bet on whether Gary will show up for the wedding photos tomorrow?" I agreed because this uneasiness I've been feeling made me want to know the answer too. But it was clear, I lost. Absolutely lost. On such an important day, even though he seemed a little guilty, he still left without hesitation. Distraught, I went to the arranged place alone. The beautiful wedding dresses didn't interest me at all. The staff greeted me warmly, and I forced myself to cooperate with the makeup artist for my look. 2 hours later. Compliments surrounded me. "Oh, Miss Emma, you look stunning. This makeup suits you so well. But it's also because you have such a good base. Miss Emma, you're so beautiful, your husband will surely be mesmerized when he sees you." The staff showered me with praise, making me feel like I was the most important person on earth. Then, they cautiously asked, "Miss Emma, it's getting late. Should we give him a call?" I looked at myself in the mirror, graceful figure, fair face, bright eyes filled with deep sadness. Frowning, I bit my lip and said a single word, "Wait." I wanted to see if he'd actually show up. Time ticked by, and Gary never arrived. A coldness settled in my heart. I called Gary, but he didn't pick up. Even his friends couldn't reach him. Suddenly, I thought of something and shakily opened Jane's social media. Of course. She updated her post with a picture of herself in the hospital, getting in for drip. She looked perfectly made up, holding her face with one hand, smiling brightly at the camera. In the distance stood a man. The man in a deep blue suit, wearing an expensive watch, held a document while talking to a doctor. Though the photo only showed the man's side profile, I knew it was Gary. That watch, I'd gifted him when he closed a big deal not too long ago. That suit, I'd carefully chosen for him. Jane captioned it, "My superhero always appears just when I need him the most." I stared at my phone like I was in a trance, until my vision blurred. A nearby staff member handed me a glass of water and some tissues, placing them in my hands. She wanted to speak, but then held back. Eventually, she left, not saying a word. Loving Gary was something I gave my all to. Gary and I knew each other since we were kids, childhood sweethearts. He was 3 months older than me, always the standout among us kids because of his looks. When we started school, he excelled, the model student everyone admired. We were neighbors, so we always went to school and came back together. I'd sit on the back seat of his bike, shyly smiling, with his name etched deeply in my heart during that youthful, budding time. Our parents were all for it, often joking about us, leaving me embarrassed and blushing. Gary usually stayed silent at these remarks, looking at me with soft, expressive eyes, his lips curling into a faint smile. He was always like this, distant to others, but warm when it came to me. I thought I was special until Gary met Jane, and that feeling vanished. Gary and I applied to the same college and got in together. I majored in art, he chose finance. Jane was a classmate of mine. In our classes, Jane and I often competed, with her usually coming in second to me. Our classmates nicknamed us the two art department stars. We'd create in the studio, sharing and discussing our art. Sometimes, Gary would wait outside, watching us patiently until we finished drawing and joined him. Gary wasn't one for words, but Jane could talk non-stop. She was so pretty, had such a sweet smile, and spoke so nicely. It was easy to like her. Gradually, I noticed Gary mentioned Jane more often than he did me. His gaze lingered on her for longer and longer. Then, during the summer break of sophomore year, they got together. And I found out about it from my parents. Outwardly, I was calm, but inside I was torn apart. I locked myself in the studio and painted Gary's portrait for 3 whole days and nights. My parents were worried and broke down the door, taking away my paintbrush. Mom held me, saying, "Emma, is he really the only one?" I stared at her, trying to smile, but I ended up in tears. "Mom, it hurts, it really hurts. Am I not good enough? Why doesn't he like me? What should I do? What can I do without him? Mom, it really hurts here." I clutched my chest and cried into her arms until I was almost out of breath, until I had no more strength left. Eventually, I passed out and spent a week in the hospital. Once I recovered, I hid all his portraits under my bed, along with all my unspoken feelings. I watched with a mix of longing and heartbreak as Gary's smile grew. I saw him prepare elaborate breakfasts for Jane daily and stand in long lines during winter for her favorite milk tea. I watched him take off his jacket to shelter her from the rain. I kept my distance, avoiding gatherings they were at. I figured, if it's not meant to be, then we shouldn't disturb each other. I'll just quietly wish them well. By senior year, I was set on studying abroad, when Gary's family had a crisis. His family's company hit a rough patch, and his parents tragically died in a car accident while on a business trip. Their company declared bankruptcy due to poor management. Amidst all this, Jane broke up with him. It was the last straw for Gary. He couldn't cope, and he started drinking heavily, losing all motivation. When I found him drunk in a bar for the 15th time, I finally slapped him. He seemed stunned for a moment, then touched his face and gave a bitter smile. "Emma, my parents don't want me, Jane doesn't want me, the whole world has abandoned me. What else can I do but drink?" I hugged him, voice trembling, "I'm here. I care about you. Please pick yourself up. Even if the world abandons you, you still have me. I'm always here for you." Afterwards, I gave up on studying abroad. My parents were furious. "We can help Gary, but why would you risk your future?" I love painting, and the opportunity to study abroad was rare. But I couldn't leave Gary in such a tough spot. My parents, exasperated by my decision, cut off my living expenses. Because I stayed, Jane got the chance to study in Italy on a scholarship. My friends were angry too, calling me crazy for giving up the opportunity for love. But I didn't care. I knew only that Gary was struggling, and I loved him. I wanted to be there for him through this crisis. I took out my savings, over $300,000, and started a business with Gary from scratch. We faced issues like funding shortages, poor market research, and team-building challenges. Each felt like a mountain on our shoulders. I stayed up late working with Gary, did market research, built a team, and resolved issues in team collaboration. I sold my paintings to galleries, took freelance illustration jobs, and drew various styles and types of artworks for money. I swallowed my pride, learned to socialize, and even drank at events to secure business for our company. After a year, our project started to take off and gained market recognition. In 2 years, the company grew in size and influence, and in 3 years, we established a name in New York, becoming leaders in the industry. Gary became a rising star with huge potential. Today, our company has gone public successfully. Gary is worth more than ever before. In our first year of entrepreneurship, Gary asked me to be his girlfriend. I didn't agree. I didn't want to bring up the past as if I were in debt, nor did I want a boyfriend who still thought of another woman. But Gary said he didn't like Jane anymore, that he only wanted to be with me. My hesitation didn't last long. When Gary ended up in the hospital after a drinking session with a client, I flew straight to the hospital, tears welling up seeing him so weak. He gently wiped my tears and said, "Silly, I'm okay." "Okay? You're in the hospital. Why don't you take care of yourself?" "Well, what difference does it make? I'm alone anyway." He sighed softly, glancing at me. "If only a certain beautiful lady would agree to be my girlfriend, I wouldn't be so lonely. I'd be better in no time." "Okay." "Huh? What did you say?" "I said okay, I'll be your girlfriend." He was stunned for a moment, then suddenly pulled me into a tight hug, holding me for a long time. I patted him gently as he buried his head in my shoulder, saying, "Emma, thank you. I finally feel like I have a family again." "Silly, I'll always be with you, you won't be alone." After becoming a couple, my relationship with Gary kept getting stronger. He became more caring to me. But just half a year ago, Jane came back to the country. She's made a name for herself in the art world now, becoming a somewhat famous artist. On the day she returned to the country, a reporter asked her, "Any plans now that you're back?" Facing the camera, she smiled lightly. "I once lost something precious, and now I want to go back and find it. I'm not sure if there's still time." I frowned, feeling like she was hinting at something, and glanced over at Gary. Gary was staring blankly at the screen, seeming lost in thought. Then he gently patted my head, picked up a piece of watermelon, and stuffed it into my mouth, smiling as he said, "Don't worry, whatever her reason for coming back, it's got nothing to do with me." Gary kept his word. He clocked in and out of work promptly every day and avoided any social gatherings where Jane would be present. But one day, when I went to find him, I found Jane there too. It seemed like they'd been talking for a while. The two of them were sitting really close, looking over a document together. After 5 years, Jane was still just as bright and charming. She wore a red dress, looking just like a blooming rose. Her arm was almost touching Gary, and her head was nearly resting on his shoulder. Gary didn't stop her. I suddenly remembered a day after I got together with Gary. On my rare off day, I cooked a few dishes Gary liked, brought them to his office for lunch together. I sat beside Gary, eagerly serving him food and soup, but he stopped me, asking me to sit at the other side of the table. He gave some reason. Oh, right, that it was the office, and it wasn't appropriate. Since then, I was extra careful at work. At the office, I was always professional, never showing a hint of personal affection. Gary is someone who keeps things appropriate, always maintaining a safe distance. I thought it was his usual principle, but at that moment, I understood. Even the firmest principles can break down when you meet that special someone. Jane waved at me enthusiastically. "Hi, Emma, long time no see." Gary stiffened noticeably, slowly raising his head. There was a flash of barely perceptible panic in his eyes. A sadness crept into my heart, but I smiled back at Jane. Jane replied cheerfully, then turned and winked playfully at Gary. "Since your fiancé is here, I won't disturb your private time. But, remember our agreement." Hearing this, my eyebrows furrowed slightly. After Jane left, I quickly spoke up. "Spill it. What's going on here? What did they agree on?" I needed an explanation. Gary took a deep breath, looked at me, and said, "Emma, Jane found me today. She offered to do the illustrations for our campaign for free." I agreed. I was shocked. What? Why have her draw them? I've already finished mine, and you know it. Lately, I'd been working my tail off on this project, and I'd always been the one who handled the company's illustrations. I disagreed. "Emma, don't be unreasonable." Unreasonable? I was racking my brain for creative ideas, pulling all-nighters for those illustrations, finally finishing them, and now you tell me Jane's going to do them? How could you decide this without consulting me? I rarely get worked up, but this time, Gary's words lit a fire in me. "Emma," Gary looked at me, his eyes a bit disdainful, "Jane just returned from winning several international awards. She's been constantly improving, snagging accolades left and right. And you? You haven't been practicing or improving your skills over the past few years. What right do you have to compete with a rising star?" Hearing this felt like a cold bucket of water was dumped over me. I stared wide-eyed, my voice trembling in disbelief. "What do you mean? She's improving, so you think I'm complacent?" I may not have been practicing, but back in the day, I ranked first, and she was second. Are you even aware of why I stopped painting? Those opportunities to go abroad and win should have been mine. Do you have any conscience at all? Gary realized he'd said the wrong thing, trying to reach for me, but I swatted his hand away. His expression hardened. "Emma, I didn't mean it that way. I'm grateful for what you did back then, but Jane's achievements are undeniable. Emma, this is reality. From the company's perspective, Jane is the better choice. You should think it over." He walked past me and left. I chuckled bitterly, feeling utterly drained. What a reality check. Gary and I stayed in a cold war for a long time, not speaking to each other even at the office. Year-end company events came around, and as part of the management, both Gary and I had to attend. After eating and drinking our fill, Gary insisted on driving me home. Not wanting to make a scene in front of coworkers, I reluctantly got into his car. We didn't talk. The alcohol hit me, making me want to sleep. In a sleepy haze, the car drove a long way before stopping. I looked around. Where is this? Drive, I want to go back. Emma, Gary's face showed unusual warmth. Still mad? I'm sorry, I shouldn't have said those things. Forgive me, will you? No, you weren't wrong. You just spoke the truth. My heart was filled with a new kind of sorrow. Gary sighed. Emma, it's been tough for me too lately. I didn't consider your feelings enough during that incident, sorry. Whatever happened with Jane is in the past. I swear, once this collaboration is over, I won't see Jane again. With that, he got on one knee, presenting a big diamond ring. Emma, will you marry me? What did you just say? I gasped, covering my mouth. I'd imagined Gary proposing, but not like this. After a cold war, this sudden proposal, was it his way of making peace? Staring into Gary's eyes, my thoughts were a whirlwind. Are you sure this is what you want? Emma, I mean it. Didn't you say you wanted to see the Northern Lights in Tromp? Let's go there for our honeymoon. He remembered. I gotta say, it kinda touched my heart. I thought, he's just too busy to hang out, not that he doesn't care. I agreed to Gary after all. Can't help it, every time I'm with Gary, I just can't stand firm. We both silently agreed not to bring up the past. I figured, as long as we cherish the now, no one can come between us. But then, Jane showed up out of nowhere. The day before the wedding photo shoot, I was dining with friends at our usual spot. On my way to the restroom, I ran into Jane. I tried to dodge her, but she stopped me. Emma, can we talk? We got nothing to chat about. Not even about Gary? Not curious? That got me to stop. What's up? I glanced at my watch, not wanting my friends to wait long. She stared at me for a few seconds, then suddenly grinned. Emma, I heard you and Gary are taking wedding pics tomorrow, congrats. Finally got what you wanted. I frowned, feeling a bit uneasy. How'd you know about that? Gary told me, of course. We've been meeting up a lot lately. I pressed my lips together, staying silent, but my mind was a storm. Gary, he's such a nostalgic guy. Life abroad was tough, for someone like me without money or influence. Turns out he's been doing well for years. When I heard he'd bounced back, I took a chance and messaged him. Didn't expect him to send me 500 grand the very next day. I was so surprised. It hit me like a bolt of lightning, my whole body went numb. You guys, reconnected a while back? 500 grand was a huge chunk back then for Gary. Sure did. Thanks to him, I got introduced to top mentors, who really helped me find my footing in the art world overseas. I had this dizzy, nauseous wave hit me. While I gave up dreams for him, doing stuff out of my comfort zone, dropping pride in all my social dealings, he was reconnecting with the ex who ditched him. He was setting up networks for her, giving her all the freedom to thrive. And what about me? Why was I busting my butt pulling in clients for the company? Why stay up late cranking out plans? Jane spotted my pale face and seemed smug. She suddenly hugged me tight before I could dodge. I heard her whisper, Emma, let's bet. Bet whether Gary shows up for the wedding shoot tomorrow? Before I could react, she let go, gave a smug smile, then left the restroom. I wandered back to my seat dazedly, scaring my friend with my lost look. Couldn't finish the meal. She drove me home, repeatedly telling me to rest well. Once home, I rushed to the bathroom, throwing up violently. Until bile was all that came up, and I ran out of tears. Then everything came back to me. The manager came, gently offering to reschedule, since it was late. I stood up, wiped away the last unnoticed tear from my eye, and said with determination, nope, I'll still pay. But I don't need it anymore, just cancel it. Just then, my phone chimed. It was a message from Gary. Emma, the client's a bit difficult tonight. I'm still negotiating. Go to sleep, don't wait for me. Ha. I couldn't help but let out a cold laugh. I couldn't understand Gary anymore. How does he show tenderness to me yet dismiss my efforts? Talk about marriage yet flirt with an ex? I looked up at my reflection, tired, eyes red. I tried to smile but ended up with an expression worse than tears. What a fool I am. Grabbed my phone, took a screenshot of Jane's post, texted, we're done. Then hit send. Home, I crashed into bed. I dreamed again, back in the dark, damp storage room. A cold, sharp knife traced across my face. Wanting to scream, but my mouth was gagged. Heard swearing, felt the man move closer, overwhelmed by the stench of smoke and booze. I struggled desperately. Then suddenly, lightened as the cloth was removed from my eyes and mouth. Saw young Gary, and the man on the ground clutching his head. Different this time, young Gary let go of my hand, fading into shadow. He didn't pull me from the nightmare this time. I realized, he's no longer my savior. Don't know how long I slept when an irritating doorbell woke me. I frowned, didn't want to deal with it. The bell kept going. I forced myself up, felt a dizzy spell almost knock me over. That doorbell was relentless. Sigh. I dragged myself to answer. There stood Gary. My knuckles tightened on the door handle, turning white, wanted to slam it shut, but Gary blocked it. Emma, at least let me explain. Gary's voice was steady but showed some impatience. What's there left to say? Missing our wedding shoot says it all, break up is best. Tears threatened to break free, pressed them back. Breaking up over this? Seriously? Gary raised an eyebrow, annoyed. Aren't you overreacting? Yesterday was an accident. Jane got in a crash, hurt her hand. Emma, you know, Jane is a painter, and her hands mean everything to her. She didn't want the media to find out about her injury. She doesn't have many friends here, so she panicked and called me. I bit my lip, trying to keep my voice steady. So, it wasn't really the product malfunctioning. Jane called you over, right? You lied to me. Gary's eyes flickered, like he didn't expect me to question him. Maybe he thought that by explaining, he was showing respect, and I had to accept it. End of discussion, and never bring it up again, just like last time. His face showed a hint of panic, but it quickly vanished. Yes, it was my mistake, but I was afraid you'd overthink it. Next time, wherever I go, I'll report to you in advance, okay? He tried to hug me, but I pushed him away forcefully. He stumbled back a few steps, losing his patience, and started to scold me. Stop being so paranoid. I've said it 1,000 times, Jane and I are just friends now. It's over, what more do you want? It's your lack of trust that makes me scared to tell you the truth. So what if we didn't get our wedding photos taken? Can't we reschedule? Is it more important than helping someone? Jane's your classmate, how can you be so cold? Fine, you want to take the photos now? I'll get the best makeup artist and find the prettiest wedding dress for you. After a long exhausting day yesterday, now I have to explain things early this morning, and you're still causing a scene. Okay, I'll stick it out with you today, make sure you get those photos done. Gary's words were like a megaphone blaring in my head. My headache got worse. My face was hot, body cold, but my head was oddly clear. I wanted to snap back. Is Jane dying? That you drop everything for her. Are you a doctor? Can you cure her hand? But in the end, I didn't want to say anything. I closed my eyes in exhaustion, and when I opened them, there was both pain and relief. Gary, I'm not some pathetic person begging for love. I have my pride. Sorry for being difficult before, but that'll stop now. You're free now. Gary's brow furrowed deeply, like a gloomy cloud casting a shadow. What do you mean by that? It was written clearly in the text, and I'll say it again now. From now on, you can see whoever you want, do whatever you want, no need to fake it with me anymore, no need to hide your feelings. Let's break up. You're free now. Emma, you're being ridiculous. Gary snapped like he'd been kicked. He grabbed my hand, but before he could say anything, his phone rang. He picked it up and glanced at me, then turned away to answer. Hey, Jane, what's up? His voice turned soft, completely different from a moment ago. I didn't know what was said, but the sound of crying seeped through the phone. How did this happen? She was fine when I left, Gary said, visibly tense but gentle like a warm breeze. Jane, don't worry, I'm here, I won't let anything happen to you. I'll get the best doctor for your hand. I'm coming over now. He hung up and gave me a cold look, a trace of disdain in his eyes. Fine, Emma, you've made your decision, don't regret it. Get out. I yelled, shaking, not wanting to look at him anymore. Gary scoffed and walked out. The room went quiet. I let out a bitter laugh, sat on the floor against the door. Cold sweat soaked my back, breathing became hard. I used the last bit of strength to call Betty to come pick me up. Then I blacked out. When I woke up, I was in the hospital. Betty saw I was awake and sighed in relief. How did you run yourself into the ground like this, burning up to 106 degrees? Good thing you called me, or who knows what would have happened. That fever could have killed you. I gave a weak smile. Betty, thanks. No need for thanks between us, right? By the way, Emma, I called Gary to have him come see you, but he said you guys broke up. What's going on? Were you guys fighting? I felt a bitter pain inside and said, we really did break up. What? How come? Weren't you two going to get married soon? I told Betty about what happened yesterday. Betty was livid, ready to hunt Gary down. Damn it, Gary's such a jerk. He forgot how Jane left him, and who helped him get back on his feet. And Jane, when she couldn't afford paint, you bought it for her. You always bought her breakfast and dealt with debt collectors for her. I can't believe she'd just take Gary like that. Emma, we can't let them off easy. We need to make them pay. How about this? I'll have someone hack into Gary's company, shut them down. Emma. Betty talked for ages, but got no response from me. She turned to see me sitting on the bed, looking utterly sad. She quietly stopped talking. Betty, Gary, and I go way back. I really liked him, felt safe with him. I'll always remember, back in high school, on my way to the art studio, I was kidnapped by someone my dad fired, shut in a damp dark room, with no food or water. That guy tried to assault me. Gary showed up just in time to save me. He got me out, but got seriously hurt himself while fighting off the kidnappers. Back in our senior year, he tutored me. We both talked about getting into Cambridge together, and when we did, we'd be together. I made it, but he never showed up. Jane gave up on him, but I couldn't. I didn't listen to my parents and passed up the chance to study abroad, staying instead to help him start over. I just wish he could see me, even if it was just a tiny bit. He asked me out and proposed to me. I thought we felt the same way about each other, but then tears flooded my face like a broken dam. No matter how much I wiped, I couldn't stop them. I was crying so hard I could barely breathe. Emma, let's not talk about it. Gary didn't know how to cherish what he had. That's his fault. Just let it go, it's all in the past. Betty hugged me tight and gently patted my back, trying to calm me down. But it was no use, I was shaking all over from crying. Emotions poured out of me like raging floodwaters. I couldn't understand. I always went along with whatever he wanted, took everything into account for him, yet he still couldn't forget about Jane. 5 years, I stood by him for 5 years. Why couldn't he let go? And what about me? What do I even count for? Jane's arrival turned my 5 years into a joke. Gary could be summoned with just one call, always anxious about Jane's every discomfort. But when he held my hand, he didn't even notice my feverish grip. That's the difference between love and indifference. I didn't understand why people's hearts could change. He once fought kidnappers for me, almost losing his life, and now he could hurt me like it was nothing. Maybe, I never really understood Gary. Maybe, I just imagined it all in my own head. I spent just a day in the hospital before heading back home. Betty wanted to move in to keep me company, but I refused. Some hurdles I have to cross alone. In the days at home, I did a thorough clean of my room, removing every trace of Gary. Seeing those items, at first, brought tears and heartache, but gradually, I got better at controlling it. On the 10th day, Jane officially joined Gary's company, and the company's official Twitter welcomed her. By the 11th day, Jane's personal Twitter and Gary's company's official account announced that they were dating. Jane's past interview comments resurfaced. Fans realized she was talking about Gary, offering their blessings. The business whiz and stunning artist made quite the enviable pair. Gary's company stock even jumped by 10 points. Betty came by to see how I was doing and seemed a little relieved to see I was acting normal. Her hesitant curiosity was kind of funny, yet heartwarming. Honestly, when I saw their social media posts, I sort of felt, I knew it. Still, it hurt inside. With me, Gary was always low-key, not into showing off. Except for our company and a few friends, few knew about us. He never introduced me as his girlfriend, explaining before. I don't want our lives to be everyone else's gossip. Our happiness is what matters, Emma. You get me, right? Though I didn't really understand why acknowledging we were dating would be gossip, I supported his choice. But now, thinking back, he probably just didn't want that person to find out. Now they're making it all official so publicly, doesn't it just confirm that saying? The favored one is always fearless. A heartbreak turned into undying devotion, a broken mirror mended years later, such a romantic tale. Except for this story's other protagonist, who doesn't even get a name or recognition. So, what am I but some unmentionable figure? Sadness welled up, making my hand twitch and my phone slipped between the sofa cushions. As I reached to retrieve it, I found a piece of paper. Opening it, I felt as if I had been plunged into icy water. A chilling sensation stabbed through my veins, freezing me to the core. Trembling, I dialed a number. "Hey, I need you to check out someone for me." On the 15th day, I got a call from a subordinate. "Emma, get here quickly. The company's a mess." By the time I got to the office, I saw my best subordinate, Linda, arguing with Jane. "Emma started the creative department. You can't just disband it. You call those works creative? The company has no spare cash for you slackers." "No, Jane. We have to wait for Emma, you can't decide this alone. Do you even know who the director is now?" Seeing me, Jane smirked. "Emma, you're behind the times. I joined the company 4 days ago, invited by Gary himself to be the director." "Oh. Even if you're higher up, disbanding a department requires a reason, right? You need upper management approval to disband it. Who authorized this? Or are you just doing it on your own?" "It wasn't me, it was Gary. What are you doing?" Under my pressure, Jane stumbled over her words. I stepped closer, and she instinctively backed away. Someone caught her just in time. It was Gary. Without a word, he shielded Jane behind him, looking at me with a guarded expression that stung. Gary didn't show up during the whole time Linda was arguing with Jane, but he rolled in the minute I arrived, worried Jane might be at a disadvantage. I looked at him coldly. "So, you signed off on this?" Gary didn't deny it, saying, "The creative department has gotten too lax, ignoring company rules. Spreading its functions out across various departments is better for management. I founded it, yet you don't ask for my input? Gary, you really don't think much of me at all." Gary was embarrassed and pressed his lips together before saying, "Emma, I'm not trying to oppose you. But for the company to grow, removing unnecessary departments is crucial. Besides, I checked out their performance over the last year. They're late and leave early all the time, and they haven't done anything remarkable. I don't see the need for them to stick around." "Well, in that case, I'll just take them with me." "What do you mean by that?" I ignored him and walked over to the 5 people in the creative department. I asked them. "You guys were brought into the company by me, so I'm asking you now. Do you want to leave with me?" "Of course, whatever you decide, I'll respect your choice." They looked at each other and said in unison, "We're willing." I held back a smile, turned to a visibly upset Gary, and said, "Now, let's settle things between us." The office was now just me and him. "What on earth are you trying to do, Emma?" Gary asked. I quickly pulled a contract out of my bag and placed it on the table. "Sign it." On the table was a stock transfer agreement. Gary's expression changed, and he frowned, staring straight at me. I came out with it plainly. "I'm leaving the company. The shares you gave me, I'm willing to sell them back to you at market price." Gary clearly didn't expect this. He stared at me for a moment and suddenly chuckled, his tone softening. "Emma, you were the one who suggested breaking up. I was just going along with your thoughts. I think even if we break up, you shouldn't have to leave the company." "Is this about Jane?" "Yes, I did invite her here, and we are dating now. But I'm someone who keeps work and personal matters separate. Jane's arrival doesn't affect your position in the company at all. From now on, there will be 2 design departments. You'll both be directors, equally ranked. We can work together to take the company to greater heights, which I believe will be more profitable than selling your shares. You and I have put our heart and soul into the company. Are you really going to let it go so easily?" Listening to that, it sounded like I was getting some kind of huge favor. I earned my director position through skill. Jane comes along and gets such a sweet deal right away, and he says there's no favoritism. Gary wants to have it both ways with Jane and have me do his work too. I can't believe how thick-skinned he is. I laughed bitterly out of anger. "You know the company is my heart and soul, so why did you swap out the work I stayed up nights doing for Jane's stuff?" I didn't realize our company's promotion standards had gotten so low, that Jane, with no experience and no accomplishments, could come in and hold such a high position. You must really love her. But as a shareholder, I'm worried about the company's future. And with your idea of having two directors, whose voice will then be the main one? You have your current girlfriend and your ex-fiancé. Who do you think the employees will listen to more? Right now, you're just trying to keep me in place while you groom Jane. Once she's fully settled, you'll definitely find a reason to tie my hands. Gary, you're shameless. At this point, any feelings I had left for you are completely gone. This is the man I wasted years of my youth on. Let go of dreams. Neglected friends. Ignored family. Right now, I'm really regretting my 5-year investment. Gary, exposed, turned red with anger. He scribbled down a number on paper, and I dismissively said, not enough. The company's stock is up by 10 points. Things are different now. Gary frowned and wrote another number. I smirked, still not enough. Because you tried to play me, I'm adding $50 million for emotional damages. Emma, don't push it. I remember director has always wanted more influence. I wonder if he'd be interested in these shares. I said, ignoring him as I pulled out my phone. You. Gary fumed, but he had no choice. I opened my contacts and was ready to dial when Gary grabbed my hand and, through gritted teeth, said, all right, your price it is. Also, the 5 from the creative department come with me, no penalties. Whatever. I had put all my savings, over $3 million, into helping Gary start the company. He was grateful and insisted on giving me shares in return. Finally, I caved, which is how I ended up with 20% of the shares. I had dreamed that when Gary and I got married, what's mine would be his anyway. Never thought it would come in handy today. From that $300,000 investment, with Gary's company's current share price, I got $4 billion and $300 million. This deal is definitely not a loss. Why that amount? Oh, because I know that's all of Gary's working capital. I want him to feel the pinch. As soon as I stepped out, there was Jane glaring at me. I stepped up, and she hesitated a bit. Feeling mischievous, I pulled her into a hug, whispering in her ear. Jane, congrats on your rise. Let's bet whether you can handle the massive wealth Gary's promising you. Leaving Jane's unfriendly gaze behind, I let her go and waved, mockingly bidding goodbye. The 5 from the creative department left with me. These 5 are talents I personally scouted, skilled in both writing and drawing with sharp minds. Each one could hold their own alone. To hire them, we provided a unique work environment. They were crucial during the company's expansion. But over the last year, as the company stabilized, their contributions went unnoticed. Gary was only ever focused on business partnerships, totally clueless about staffing. That's why he mistook gems for mere stones. Emma, where to next? Linda asked. Come on, let's head somewhere. It's your time to shine. When they saw rows of computers in a room full of drawings, Lily and the others were speechless with excitement. Emma, what's going on? A bearded man stood up and answered for us. Welcome, elites, to the development team of the game, Celestial Strategy. The bearded guy's name was Max. He's a game designer. Back in the day, he came to Gary's company with a game idea from him and his college buddies, hoping to catch Gary's interest for investment. Gary thought the gaming market was already saturated and turned him down. But I was intrigued and met Max privately. I believed it had great potential, so I decided to invest in the game and set up a studio for him to focus on development. Gary didn't know about the studio or the investment in the game. I was planning to surprise him once the game was a success and merge it with the company. But now, that's no longer needed. So, the game team and 5 folks from the creative department got busy. Max had mentioned to me before about the lack of funds and manpower for the game's development. Selling my shares and bringing in the creative team solved all those problems. The development of Celestial Strategy sped up like magic. A week later, Miss Emma, using Mr. Gary's flight details, hotel records, and credit card transactions, we've gathered some information. It's all organized for you to look over. The private detective's investigation yielded results. I locked myself in a room, quietly going through the stack of documents on the desk. They revealed the hidden past of Gary and Jane. It turned out Gary wasn't as busy as he claimed. He found time to accompany Jane on her every whim and take her to Hokkaido once a year to admire the snow and stunning winter scenery. Yet, whenever I tried to plan something, he always dodged with the "too busy with work" excuse, breaking promises time and again. The things under the bed last time were an art exhibition invitation. 2 years ago, Master held an exhibition in Germany. I loved his painting style and wanted Gary to go with me. But he said he was about to leave for a business trip in Korea and couldn't make it. I understood and decided to go alone. The night before my departure, there was an emergency with a company project. Gary called asking if I could stay to handle it, promising to return soon to relieve me. I agreed, but he never came back till after the exhibition ended and never brought it up again. So, what was the deal with that? The invitation distinctly bore Gary and Jane's names. My tears betrayed me again. It wasn't about time, it was about priorities. He set obstacles just to keep me away craftily. I was in the dark back then, but now it's all clear, and too late. I desperately wanted to confront Gary. Doesn't he feel guilty for everything he did to me? Did he hurt me so recklessly just because he didn't love me anymore? Did they laugh at my foolishness and mock my pathetic efforts while they were together? Thinking about it left me stuck, with a lump in my throat. The sweet moments Gary and I shared over the years felt as revolting as candy dropped in filth. Just the thought made me sick. Why? I'm the one hurt, betrayed, and who gave the most. But they get to succeed and bask in everyone's blessings? That just isn't right. There's no such thing as free lunches in this world. I'll reclaim everything that was deceitfully taken from me. I wiped away my tears and stored the documents safely, but the resentment inside lingered. I threw myself into work like never before. During this time, my parents called and asked me to visit home. Gary and Jane's public displays of affection made it clear to my parents that we had broken up. Ever since our Cold War, I hadn't seen them. When I did, the new gray hairs on Dad's head and the new wrinkles on Mom's face hit me hard. I wanted to slap myself silly. How ungrateful was I to make my loving parents worry and break their hearts over some heartless fool, keeping them from enjoying the joy of having their kids around. I knelt before my parents, sincerely apologizing for my stupidity and unfilial ways. But how could Mom really hold it against me? She hugged me, crying for what seemed like forever. Even my usually composed dad was tearing up. The three of us finally enjoyed a happy family meal together. Afterward, I shared about my current status and future plans. They were incredibly supportive and said that if ever needed, they'd always be my strongest support. 6 months passed, and the game development was a success. We held a game launch event. Max, as the lead game designer, attended with me. He got so much flack for his scruffy beard that he shaved it off in frustration. I even picked out a customized suit for him. I have to admit, he cleaned up nice. Standing nearly 6'3", with fair skin and a tall, lean build, he transformed from a scruffy guy into quite the gentleman. He seemed slightly awkward, scratching his head and wiping sweat now and then. I patted him on the back, smiling, "Relax, just focus on presenting the game. I've got the rest." Then a few reporters rushed in, and in my moment of distraction, I almost fell. But instead, I stumbled right into a familiar embrace. A pair of big hands steadied me by the shoulders. "Careful." I was startled, turning to see it was Gary. He looked at me with a bright smile. "Emma. Long time no see." I freed myself from his arms, brushing off my shoulders with disgust, not wanting to engage. He seemed a bit resigned, even doting. "Emma, is this really necessary?" Then, in a tone mixed with pity, he added, "You've lost weight." I mentally rolled my eyes at him but kept a poker face. After giving him a brief glance, I walked in another direction. Didn't expect it, but Gary followed me. He cleared a path through the crowd for me, chatting about random stuff along the way. I didn't respond, but he kept yakking. I'm really impressed that you developed a game on your own in such a short time. I'm here to congratulate you, he began. Emma, when we broke up, I didn't know you were sick. Betty called me about checking on you, but I was mad and said terrible things. I really regret it. The team at the company misses you, and so do I. You're always welcome back. You'll always be an irreplaceable part of us, no matter what. Unable to tolerate his pestering, I pulled him into a corner. Enough, Gary. This is my studio's game launch. I don't want to lose my temper. What are you really after? Gary pursed his lips, hesitating. Finally, he said awkwardly, I actually wanted to ask if you could give my company a shout-out during the launch? Just as I suspected. He's up to no good. How exactly do you expect me to do that? I suppressed my anger, curious just how shameless he could be. Sensing an opportunity, Gary eagerly went on, your game attracted a lot of players even in its test phase, which shows potential. There are lots of reporters here today, too. Just a mention of my company after your presentation would really boost our profile. I almost clapped for his nerve, but I refused. Gary seemed shocked. Why? It'd be so easy for you. This easy thing? First, introducing your company at our launch ties us together, and we never agreed to that. Second, that misleads players into thinking you were involved in the game's development, and we'd bear any fallout from that mix-up. Third, what basis do I have to promote your company? We're not connected in any way. Gary, are you just used to getting free rides, or are you really that dumb and conniving? He turned pale, forced a smile, and said, Emma, come on, can't you do a friend a favor? Our company is one of the city's top players. It's a win-win. I couldn't help but laugh. Gary, what kind of relationship do we even have? We're exes. Talking like that is just misleading, don't you find it gross? I glanced around. Where's Jane? Does she know you're here meeting me? Don't forget, you're with her now. Surprisingly, Gary seemed pleased, saying with a smile, Emma, if you're this bothered by Jane, it means you still care about me, right? Hearing that made me feel like I swallowed a fly. Before I could argue, Max approached me with a tie in hand, looking a bit embarrassed. Emma, sorry, I can't tie a tie. Can you help me? His handsome face had such a pleading look that I couldn't refuse. My anger dissipated quite a bit. Sure. I said. No way. Gary and I said at the same time. I glanced at Gary. He frowned, sizing Max up. When he saw Max's suit, his eyes locked on it in disbelief. Emma, this suit, you picked it for him, didn't you? It's the same brand and style you always got me. Why him? He's just an employee. Even if you're friendly with subordinates, there's a line. Gary said through gritted teeth, shooting a glare at Max. Ignoring him, I neatly tied Max's tie, not acknowledging Gary's black face at all. Looking good. You'll do great. I patted Max on the shoulder. His face visibly reddened. As the launch began, Max and I walked on stage together. Passing by Gary, I whispered, you're overstepping. With all that energy, focus on yourself or spend more time with your girlfriend. You've yearned for years, finally got what you wanted, don't mess it up. Gary looked at me, opened his mouth but said nothing. The game launch went smoothly. Max explained the game while I introduced the studio. During the test phase, the game already attracted many fans. A player asked, I love the character Sia. I heard you designed her. What was your inspiration? Smiling, I replied, she's inspired by Medea from Greek mythology. She's a tragic, fierce woman who helped her lover win the Golden Fleece, only to be betrayed. I sympathized with her, so I designed Sia and changed her story's outcome. I glanced around and locked eyes with Gary. His face stiffened as he met my gaze. After all, I continued, true feelings shouldn't be squandered. It's the traitors who deserve punishment. When the launch ended, Gary looked conflicted, like he had something to say. But I was surrounded by reporters, and he couldn't get close. He left, looking back repeatedly. That night, I got a message from him, "Emma, let's meet at our usual place tomorrow at 6. I have something to tell you." I scoffed. That familiar tone of his, giving no room for refusal. Still just as confident as ever. But thinking about how I was the one who gave him that confidence, it stung. For the 5 years I was with Gary, when I asked him out for dinner or a movie, he'd often be late or reschedule for various reasons. But when he asked me out, I'd always make time for him, even if I'd have to work late into the night afterward. Looking back now, from an outsider's perspective, that relationship was uneven from the start. I handed the control over to Gary, always accommodating him, giving him the chance to hurt me. With that thought, I deleted the message and ignored it. But then, curiosity crept in about how Gary was doing. I soon found out through Linda. Linda had gone to a dinner with former colleagues. She came back and shared some gossip at the studio. She mentioned Gary hadn't been doing well lately. "What's up?" He hired this director, Jane Lynn, who turned out to be all show, no substance. Said she graduated from a top school abroad with tons of awards but has no real skills. How so? A few people gathered to ask. Linda's voice rose, clearly enjoying the gossip. "Seriously, it's a workmate from PR said." She mentioned the company got a design ad contract from HJ Jewelry 4 months ago. They wanted a classic elegant style, but Jane went with a lavish and decadent vibe. The client wasn't pleased, and Jane actually told them they didn't know how to appreciate real art. Oh my gosh, that's HJ. The top tier in the fashion world. How could she say something like that? The people around laughed, gossiping. Exactly, HJ's rep was so upset, they blacklisted Gary's company, saying they'd never work with them again. Gary even took Jane to apologize, but they wouldn't even let them in the door. The prouder you are, the humbler you fall. Jane deserved every bit of it. Amen to that. Rumor has it there was a huge blowout between Gary and Jane in the company. Jane left in tears. Gary later just left the company management to Jane. Problem is, she didn't know a thing and randomly directed things, leaving the company in chaos. Employees not only worked overtime all the time, but their pay and bonuses were slashed. Understandably, they were miserable. Really? Good thing we followed Emma and left. Otherwise, we'd be exploited by her. Our Emma is beautiful, kind, and talented. I can't fathom why Gary left Emma for Jane. Shoo, keep it down. You'll upset Emma. The chatter gradually softened. What they didn't know was that I heard every word while sitting in my office. So that's what happened. I took a sip of my coffee. Today's coffee brewed by Linda was just right. No complaints here. After launching, the game took off and went viral several times. Downloads and user registrations soared. I put Max in charge of the gaming studio while I started a design company to go toe-to-toe with Gary. 2 weeks later, it was Alex's 70th big birthday celebration. My parents wanted me to attend on their behalf. I knew it was their way of giving me an opportunity to promote my company. With Alex's stature in the business world, his birthday bash would be a prime chance to raise my company's profile. I planned to attend with Max and Linda. But just before we headed out, Linda suddenly said she couldn't make it. So, it was just Max and me going to the party. By the time we got there, the hall was already bustling with guests. Laughter and conversation filled the air. "Mr. Mark, our contract from last year is expiring. When you have some time, can we discuss renewing it?" Gary's voice came from behind me. He was bent over, speaking humbly to a man. At 6 feet tall, he was trying to make himself smaller, like a humble student. The man glanced at Gary, then snapped his fingers, saying, "Oh, Gary. Look at me forgetting." Gary's face lit up with a smile, but it quickly faded as the man continued, "Our company is transitioning tech-wise, so there's no rush on the renewal. We've got time." Hearing this, Gary hurriedly replied, "Mr. Mark, we can adapt to your needs. We're very committed." "Gary, it's Alex's birthday today, so let's set these matters aside for now, alright? No need to overshadow the main event." The man's tone carried a subtle warning. "Alright, okay." Gary was forced to agree. Suddenly, Mr. Mark, who had been speaking with Gary, noticed me. He stepped over to greet me warmly, engaging in friendly conversation. I was caught off guard but responded enthusiastically, and we found mutual interest in working together. Throughout our conversation, I could feel Gary's gaze on me. But when I turned to look, he had his head down, making it hard to read his expression. Not sure what was going on in his mind. Half an hour later, Alex made his entrance. Jane approached from another direction, standing next to Gary. Everyone started offering their gifts to Alex. Since I was representing my parents' group, which had business ties with Alex's company, I'd prepared an extravagant gift. It was crafted by a renowned jade master. Alex accepted it with delight, clearly entranced. His family also thanked us warmly. But when it was Gary and Jane's turn, Alex's smile vanished. I looked over and couldn't help but cover my mouth to stifle a laugh. Jane presented a painting of a mighty tiger. She didn't know Alex's zodiac animal was the monkey, which clashes with the tiger. Jane was still going on about the power of the tiger in her blessings. Meanwhile, Gary's face grew dark as he sternly told Jane to stop. Jane gave him a disapproving glance before continuing, "Alex, I painted this myself. Though I lack much talent, I've learned from many esteemed masters and made a name abroad. Just a simple painting. If Alex likes it, I hope you can lend us a hand in the future. If there's any work related to painting or design, please think of our company." Alex stroked his beard and said to Gary in a meaningful tone, "Gary's girlfriend is quite the talker and talented, huh? Gary, you're really lucky." "Yes, yes." Gary mumbled an agreement beside him, turning red in the face like a beet. "No need to be so formal. Gary and I are planning to have our engagement ceremony next month. I hope Alex can honor us by attending," Jane said, clearly not grasping the situation as she excitedly kept talking. She was oblivious to the look she got from everyone around her, like they were watching a clown. That's enough. Gary couldn't take it anymore. But with everyone around, he couldn't just blow up. He gave Jane a fierce glare and pulled her aside, remaining silent. After giving the gifts, the birthday banquet started. Gary and I were seated at the same table. Jane sat to Gary's left, cozied up to him, chatting away happily. But Gary kept a straight face the whole time. The AC at the banquet was a bit chilly, and I regretted choosing style over comfort. While I was fretting, a large shawl was placed over my shoulders, giving me a bit of warmth. I was slightly taken aback and looked at Max. "Emma, you've just gotten over a cold. We can't have you catching another one. Your health is important for the team's success," Max said with a smile. Then he pointed to the lamb soup on the table and said, "Emma, this lamb soup is delicious. Let me get you a bowl to warm you up." He then took my bowl, filled it, and placed it in front of me. "Where did Emma find such a great assistant? He was searching the entire hall for you while you were away, and now he's taking such good care of you," a girl sitting nearby teased. I recognized her as the heiress of the famous group. "He's not an assistant. He's the creator of the game, Tian Xian Su, and his contribution was key to its success," I explained. The girl's eyes lit up instantly, and she gave Max a sweet smile. "My friends and I play that game all the time. I didn't know the creator was so handsome. My dad's company is in gaming too. Whatever Emma pays you, we'll double it. Join us." I frowned, feeling quite displeased. I was irked by being poached publicly, among other things, and felt a strange frustration. Max waved his hand and replied with a laugh, "Ms., you flatter me. I'm just a coder, nothing special. Emma treats me well, and I have no plans to leave. Max paused, dropped the smile, and earnestly said, besides, there's someone I care about here, and I'd like to protect her and be close to her. I wasn't sure if it was my imagination, but I felt like he glanced at me after he said that. My restlessness melted away, and my face flushed. I quickly took a sip of water to calm myself down. There was a loud thud, chopsticks hitting the table. Oh, someone you care about? How touching. Do you think the company is your dating ground? As your superior, do you not even know Emma's tastes? She doesn't like lamb, Gary said coldly, directing his comment at Max but looking right at me. Huh. You might be mistaken, Gary. I remember during our team dinner, Emma clearly loved the lamb. She made us all fans of it. She even mentioned wanting to open a lamb restaurant someday. Max cheerfully replied as he looked at Gary. What? Gary looked at me, stunned. No wonder he was surprised. He didn't know I avoided eating lamb because he disliked it. I've always loved lamb, especially its rich flavors in lamb soup. But out of consideration for his feelings, I never mentioned my preference, limiting my indulgence to when he wasn't around. So, all these years, he never knew. Should I praise myself for hiding it well, or lament Gary's lack of attention? Either way, it doesn't matter anymore. I looked at Max, feeling a warm sensation inside me. I picked up the soup spoon, took a sip, and nodded in approval. It's good. Max's smile grew even wider. Gary was at a loss, only snapping back to reality when Jane tugged at his arm unhappily. He bowed his head, keeping silent. After the meal, Gary remained busy in the venue, trying to network and seek business opportunities. But despite his efforts, everyone just brushed him aside, making light conversation as they moved past him, unwilling to engage. Some even mocked him outright. Gary, let's be straight. With someone like Director Lin, so candid and unique, we wouldn't dare hire such a designer. Your company's business level needs a lot of work. The veins in Gary's forehead bulged in anger, but he suppressed it, forcing a smile as he looked for the next potential partner. On the other hand, I was doing well, thanks to our successful game and its stunning visuals. Several companies extended an olive branch, expressing interest in partnerships. We exchanged business cards and agreed to meet again for deeper discussions. After bidding farewell, Max went to get the car while I waited. Not far away, I noticed Gary and Jane arguing. I stepped behind a column to hide myself. Why did you swap out the gift I prepared? What's more meaningful than a painting I did myself? I'm an award-winning artist, remember? Gary angrily pointed at Jane, struggling to speak. Other paintings I could let slide, but you gave a tiger painting to someone born under the monkey zodiac? Don't you know monkeys and tigers clash? Alex is superstitious about this. We don't even mention tiger in business. Now you've directly given him a painting of it. How do you expect him to view us? Jane then realized her mistake and awkwardly said, I didn't know that was an issue. Vince is the one who suggested it to show sincerity. I just thought, since the company's business hasn't been doing well, promoting my paintings might help. But it just ended up backfiring. You just don't get it, do you? Stop trying to be clever. I tell you what to deliver, just deliver it. Why are you so dumb, always causing trouble? Seriously, how many messes have you made in the past 6 months? And bringing up the engagement at that event? Not the place, dude. Who do you think you are? Jane couldn't take the criticism and snapped back, dumb? You're the one who's dumb. Emma's company hasn't been around for long and is already about to outdo us. It can't all be just because of her, right? Gary, feeling called out, retorted, if you'd been useful at all, the company wouldn't be overtaken so fast. I'm really curious how you got those awards abroad. Jane's face changed when she heard that, but she quickly hid it, saying, come on, Gary, I know you're stressed, but we can't rush this. I don't think it's just Emma doing all the work. Max seems pretty special. Wouldn't be surprised if they were working against you while Emma was still in our company. No way. Gary snapped, though his eyes showed doubt. Emma wouldn't do that. Wouldn't she? The way Max looks at Emma seems off. Maybe she was cheating on you with him before you broke up. Enough. Gary shook Jane's hand off in frustration. Jane lost her balance and fell to the floor. Gary. Jane reached for Gary, but his glare stopped her. She held her arm, tears threatening to fall. Regaining some composure, Gary's voice remained cold. Jane, you've got to realize the company isn't like before. We can't afford any mistakes. Or we're done. Watch yourself. With that, he left her behind. Unintentionally witnessing the drama, I felt oddly entertained. Max came back with the car. In the car, I relaxed with my eyes closed and music on. When we got home, I got out of the car. Suddenly, Max stopped me and handed me a box of pastries. I was a bit surprised and instinctively took it. Emma, you didn't eat much tonight, but you had 2 of these pastries, so I thought you might like them. I asked the chef for some freshly made ones, Max said gently, offering a bright smile. Emma, in the game, Sia has a happy ending, and you will too. Regardless of what you decide, we're here to support you. See you tomorrow, sweet dreams. Max finished, walking away. Watching Max leave and holding the box of pastries, a mix of emotions that I couldn't quite explain welled up inside me. I also admired his keen observation. Gary's loss of clients over the past year wasn't an accident, it was bound to happen. Many deals were secured because of my parents' reputation and my hard work. Starting out, no one trusted me, so I did free design work, studied their company styles, and catered to their preferences. With countless revisions, I slowly gained their trust. Why should the network I built go to waste for someone else's benefit? Once my design company launched, these ties came with me. Gary and them will just have to try harder for business from now on. Jane's situation was something I orchestrated. Vince has worked for me for a while. I specifically instructed Vince to mislead Jane, knowing she'd likely take the bait. Even if she didn't, it wouldn't matter. A few more tries should do it. I've always been someone who clearly differentiates between friends and foes. Isn't setting a small trap fair play? With the launch of the design company, there was a ton to do. Fortunately, with everyone's support and 5 years of business experience, I managed pretty well. Meanwhile, Gary's company kept going downhill. Vince was fired, so I hired her at a higher salary. She showed up and immediately started venting about Jane and Gary's horrific management and how tough it was for her undercover. I just handed her a ticket to Finland, gave her 2 weeks of paid leave, and shut her up quick. Employees kept leaving Gary's company, while I cherry-picked the best, boosting our performance even more. That said, there were setbacks. In September, Jane snagged a major client, costing us big. She even messaged me to brag, same as before. The engagement ceremony for Gary and Jane was postponed until February, and they invited me. Couldn't be bothered, so I sent Linda and Max to go instead. Linda left fuming, but returned gleeful. You should have seen it. Mid-ceremony, this family crashed the party with signs demanding justice, saying things like, an eye for an eye. We were all shocked. Reporters were quick to snap pictures. It turned into an expose on Jane. Allegedly, a girl from Jane's grad school committed suicide after Jane stole her competition entry and accused her of copying. Her family tried to get justice, but Jane paid them off. The family had a video of Jane threatening their daughter, proving her guilt beyond doubt. This time, Jane can't weasel out of it. Linda animatedly recounted the event. I listened casually, catching Max's intense gaze. His eyes were filled with an emotion I couldn't place, and it made my heart race. Suddenly, he made a goofy face, totally out of sync with his handsome features. I couldn't help but laugh. That night, I brought a fine bottle of wine to Betty's place. We drank until we were very tipsy in her villa. Betty, thank you. We don't need to say thank you. I'd do it even if you didn't ask me. Emma, I can't believe those two did such dirty things behind your back. I wish I could tear them apart. You've suffered, Emma. Those ungrateful jerks, how could they do something so awful? How could they deceive you like that? Betty got all worked up as she talked and started crying softly. I hugged her gratefully, feeling a bit helpless, and gently patted her to comfort her. My eyes were a little wet too. While I was looking into Jane, I accidentally found that part of her past was deliberately covered up. I got suspicious and had someone dig deeper. That's when we uncovered this whole thing. It happened 3 years ago, and Jane had paid off a lot of people, making it tough to find out. Thanks to Betty's help, we found the victim's family. They had given up, but with someone stepping in to help, they were willing to testify. I planned to expose everything during their engagement ceremony, catching them off guard with nowhere to hide. That video played a crucial role. Without it, it wouldn't have been nearly as effective. Betty, thanks for finding an expert to fix the video. I found the video of Jane intimidating a girl in the hotel, but the quality was too poor to use. I'm genuinely thankful for everything Betty did for me. Betty looked up in confusion, her eyes puzzled. What video repair? Wasn't it fine when you handed it to me? I let go of her, shocked. It wasn't you who fixed it? Betty mumbled something and quickly fell asleep on the table, leaving me alone in deep thought. The incident at the engagement ceremony blew up online, making several trending topics on Twitter. Then, people from the art world revealed that many of Jane's awards were bought by bribing judges. Reporters dug up that Jane had inappropriate ties with several art masters during college, even getting publicly beaten by one master's wife. Another scoop revealed Jane was two-timing with a known heir from Sky Group while dating Gary, only settling for Gary once her first choice was gone. Sky Group was the company Jane stole the deal from in September. Oh, that makes sense now. People flooded Jane and Gary's company's social media with criticism. There were tens of thousands of comments about them online. Oh man, I used to think Jane was a genuinely talented artist. Turns out she got ahead by stepping on others. How she got so many honors that older artists haven't gotten. Well, guess it was really all about sleeping with the right people and having money. Gary looks pitiful too, blindsided by all this. I heard he paid for Jane's overseas studies, only to have his heart betrayed. Hey, don't pity him. His sincerity was built on someone else's pain. He's just as much to blame. What's going on? Any gossip? See for yourself. That user posted a link. It detailed everything between Jane, Gary, and me, including a timeline of events. I curiously clicked it. The story started from our college days, explained our relationships, Gary's family going bankrupt, how I gave up studying abroad for him, and how he secretly dated Jane while seeing me, ultimately supporting her to success. It ended with Gary ditching me, kicking me out of his company, and bringing Jane in, making their relationship public. The account knew our history better than I did. The writing was so heartrending, it could make anyone cry. I face-bombed. This kind of exposure is so embarrassing. I felt ashamed of the stupid things I did back then. Netizens soon found my and my company's Twitter accounts, leaving messages of support. Hey girl, don't cry. Leaving a jerk means you'll have a better life. In just a year, she developed a game and started a company. What a talent. It's his loss. She's a role model. Focus on your career. We support you. I replied to one saying, thanks, that's how I feel too, then got back to work on my project. Because of this whole ordeal, Tianxian strategy brought in a new wave of traffic, boosting my company's reputation and growth. Thanks, Gary and Jane, for the unintentional publicity. Gary called me again 3 weeks later. I just closed a big deal and was about to sleep when my phone rang. I answered without checking, hello there. My upbeat tone kept the other line silent for a few seconds before a deep voice said, Emma, it's me. My good mood vanished instantly. Emma, I'm glad you're willing to talk to me. How have you been? I stayed quiet, and he continued, Emma, lately, I've been thinking of you a lot. I even dreamt about our past last night. Back then, starting a business with all our money tied up was hard, but we encouraged each other. I worked on plans, and you did the drawings. We worked toward one goal together. It was great. My favorite bakery near our office got a renovation recently. It's bigger and nicer now. I bought your favorite Black Forest cake there. It used to taste too sweet, but now I found it surprisingly delicious. I ate it all. Emma, I ran out of the stomach medicine you got me. The new brand I bought isn't as good. How did you find such perfect medicine for me? You used to tell me not to eat spicy food or drink too much with others, but I never listened. After 2 hospital stays, I learned how to make porridge and take care of myself. Funny how late it is. I took a deep breath and stopped him. Gary, I don't have time for this nostalgia trip. If there's nothing important, I'm hanging up. No, don't. Gary's voice was a bit choked up. He paused, then said, Emma, did you forget what today is? I was surprised and checked my phone. It was September 24th, Gary's birthday. I remembered how I used to plan surprises for his birthday. I'd reschedule everything just to be with him. Even if I was away for work, I'd catch the earliest flight back. But now, what's the point of bringing that up? Emma, I'm sorry. I want to apologize for ignoring you and being cold in the past, for all the mistakes and hurt I caused you. I'm sorry. We've ended up like this, and it's my fault entirely. But I still miss you so much. You once said you'd always be there for me. Can you give me a chance to make things right? He was crying as he spoke. I took a deep breath to calm myself. Gary, I'm not that forgiving. I can't pretend like nothing happened. I don't want your apology, it just disgusts me. I took a moment and said what I'd been wanting to say. You know what I truly hated? It wasn't that you loved Jane, it was that you didn't love me but still asked me to be your girlfriend and even proposed. I'd have been okay with just being a friend or like a sister. But you broke my heart. And once I've thrown out the trash, I don't pick it up again. So, please, leave my life. I hung up. I'd stopped loving him completely. I decided to fly to Trump to see the Northern Lights. On the plane, I ran into Max. He smiled, rubbing his nose. What a coincidence. A friend of mine is hosting a music festival in Trump this month and invited me over. Since we're headed the same way, want to stick together? I neither agreed nor refused. On the 3rd day in Trump, we saw the Northern Lights. They were breathtaking. With a flick of its magic wand, the aurora painted the sky with green, blue, purple, and red in unpredictable, dream-like patterns. The best part? I bumped into a renowned painter, almost my mentor, Mrs. Cora. I showed her my latest work, and she pointed out the flaws but also appreciated my innovation. Before leaving, Mrs. Cora gave me her contact info, saying to reach out anytime. I looked at Max, feeling a bit suspicious. Did you set this up? Was it that obvious? Max scratched his head, a bit embarrassed about being caught. Max, or should I say Mr. Heir, the sole successor of a fortune. Am I right? Couldn't fool you, Max laughed. When did you figure it out? Not hard, I chuckled. Your aura, how others treat you during meetings, your top-notch computer skills. I heard there's someone unmatched with tech back home, like you. When we met Mrs. Cora, she acknowledged you first, meaning you're familiar. Did you invite her? When Jane got exposed, I found a blurry video as evidence, but someone made it crystal clear. Turns out, that was you, wasn't it? So, why help me? Max took my hand, his gaze soft and serious. I think you know by now, I care about you. Love you, even. Emma, that day at the company wasn't our first meeting. In college, I saw you sitting by the lake, painting, oblivious to everyone staring, myself included. Your eyes were beautiful. You painted everything around, and even I, who knows nothing about art, could see how talented you were. It was love at first sight for me, and I wanted to know you. Eventually, I learned your name, studies, and how you were the most gifted art student in decades. I even changed my study abroad plans to Italy for a chance to meet you. But when I arrived, you weren't there. You'd stayed for that guy. I tried to see you through a business proposal to Gary's company, pretending to find collaboration, when really, I just wanted to meet you. He wasn't interested, but you were. I was so happy to know you at last. So yeah, everything you saw was me hoping you'd move on. Cora meeting you, the video fixes, even exposing Jane's infidelity to Gary. I don't need you to be impressed, I just want to be there for you. I looked into his eyes, deep and captivating. Sorry, I'm not ready for love right now. In the end, I still turned down Max, even though I was a bit tempted. I watched the strange lights brought by the aurora, feeling the gift of nature, and suddenly had an epiphany. In the vast universe, people seem so insignificant. Life should be an irregular shape free of constraints. Love should be an added bonus, not the whole life. There are so many other things to try in life. I've been stuck for too long, and now I want to find my own path. After being exposed online, Jane's art career completely tanked. She got blacklisted by the entire industry and was fired by Gary's company. Gary also publicly announced the cancellation of their engagement. Because of this incident, businesses cut ties with Gary's company too. The company, already on a downward trend, took an even bigger hit. By the end of December, Gary's company went bankrupt. Unexpectedly, Jane took off abroad with the last of Gary's money. Gary, drowning in debt, also fled the country. Hearing this, my hand froze on the car door, fingers clenched tightly around the handle. He veered the car and hit her. Gary himself also died from serious injuries. Listening to Betty describe the events to me, I felt nothing inside. The design company entered a rapid growth phase, and the gaming studio was steadily progressing. However, Max quit. I was a bit down when I heard the news. Once the dust settled, I handed the design company over to Linda, appointing her as CEO, and Vince as director. The gaming studio was managed by the second-in-command from Max's team. They both ran the company and the studio successfully. As for me, I went back to school, studying art under Ms. Cora, starting to finish what I hadn't completed. After honing my skills, I traveled and painted around the world. My art improved and became more famous. I held exhibitions and even took on apprentices, finally realizing my old dream. 3 years later, in a cafe in Paris, I was enjoying coffee and casually sketching the street scenery on paper. Suddenly, a familiar voice asked, "Hi, can I sit here?" The sun set, casting a golden glow on him. I looked up at Max and smiled, "Sure,